Well, as Roman said, thank you for inviting me to give this speech. So, my name is Almudena, and I've been working in Telefónica Digital for the last 8 months now. Basically doing some performance research and trying to make our systems better for the public in general. Last 8 years, actually, it's almost 9 already. I've been working as performance test engineer with different tools and environments. Okay, it's not only for Linux, but as well for Microsoft. In places like InfoJobs, that there are some people here from it. Círculo de Lectores for the Ayuntament, Telefónica, Azcar, Sage, things like that. Okay. What I'm going to talk about today, basically, is web performance optimization. Though there are other kinds of clients or applications that we can do this methodology to. Okay, we can apply performance methodology to some other applications or APIs or whatever. But basically, it's focused on web performance optimization. You will see me talking about user interaction pretty much during all the talk. So, where we come from? What's our past? The past is dark, okay? We have no instruments, always as performance engineers, we have no instruments, we have no users review, we have none or late performance testing, we got no real user monitoring, we got no idea what our users were doing, and we are reactively performance tuning. So, it's all dark, it's an old vehicle, right? It's reactive. We always, as performance tester, we always arrive when the platform or the systems has dropped, is down. When there's a crisis, it's always when the performance tester is required. It's like a firefighter. So there are no tools for performance, usually, in a company. When I mean tools, it's open source tools or commercial tools, like LoadRunner, that's really expensive. SilPerformer is really expensive as well. But you have JMeter, that is really easy, or any Apache benchmark or whatever benchmark tool. But usually they are not used in a live environment or production environment. So what happens that performance is for sysadmins and operators. It's always when there's a crisis that people are reminded about performance. The releases at that point in the past, I'm always talking about the past, the releases are costly, and it may take several months of work, meaning that there is no time for performance improvements. There is no time for developers to be involved in the performance. What happens usually as well is that the tuning is done in production environment, and those changes are never, ever back to QA or to developers' machines. So you lose those changes in the way back. Those tweaks to performance are usually performed on production environment with zero testing. So it's like magic. This works. Okay, so this is manual testing. Every release of code freeze, we have a manual testing of saying, okay, I get the feeling in my guts this is going worse. This takes longer to interact or whatever, but it's always in your guts. Okay, so there's no concurrent testing and even less a load testing or a stress. So what happens that non-functional requirements are ignored? You say, how did you say that this page got to take in loading? Or did you say 2 seconds? Or, well, it takes 10. Okay, it's non-functional requirements are ignored. And I'm talking about response time, yeah, even less if you talk about resources. It's like, how much did you say this takes in CPU? Okay, nothing. Just buy more, it's easy. So usually the systems are of a dimension and covers for all the bad software design. That's what we have in the past and sometimes in the present. And I know for your faces that you're suffering of that. So what happens as well, that there's no real monitoring. That's, you have the health check of the servers, of the system, but there's no really a real user monitoring. You don't know what your user is doing, what your user is watching in your website. And what happens that you realize there's a problem when the marketing KPIs, such as abandon rate and the business revenues, arrives to the production people. Okay, so it maybe takes like a certain amount of time that we don't want to. Usually users' feedback is negative, and, or at least the feedback that you receive as a production operator is negative. It's always a negative part. And of course, there's no interaction between users and developers and designers. So there's no way to know how the performance about your user, how the performance is affecting your users. As well, the performance, of course, as I've said before, the performance application affects straight into the market. So there's a straight relation between abandon rate and performance issues. You will see that every Black Friday in the States, that the revenues are really increasing when the performance in that site is increased. So there's a straight relation between them. So what is the present? The present sometimes is this one I've said, that is dark. Okay, but at least in many places now where we have agile methodologies implemented, we have this functional testing, the continuous integration, we have a continuous delivery or continuous deployment sometimes, and everything is automated and monitored. But sometimes, and usually actually, we forget about performance testing in our pipelines. So we are better, but we can improve. We have this continuous integration for functional testing. Every night we have these builds and we run our smoke tests and our JUnit or unitary tests. Okay, so we can do something about that. Of course, automation reduces time to market for applications. This makes that the builds are faster getting live. The product is getting to our users' life faster. And what happens that the performance issues are fast. You are seeing them coming faster. So you have more performance issues than before because the product is developing faster. So there's a problem there. Of course, you need some kind of tool to monitor, and I think that some people yesterday talk about monitoring tools. So you don't need just to check the health of your servers, your CPU, your memory, your I/O weights, whatever, but you need to know about the real user behavior, what kind of users you have. It's one guy on Facebook just randomly clicking on the page, watching the pics of someone, or it's someone that works with that application and it's really caring about the performance because he got to give a report for his manager in 5 minutes. Okay, so you have to know about the psychology of the user. Of course, there's an errors and risk management behind all this work. And sometimes we crash. And when we crash, we do it properly with all the equipment, full equip. Okay, but we have some risk management. We have consider all the errors or the critical impact in our functional testing. So usually when we break in production, it's usually due to performance issues that no one cares about at this point. So again, it's tuning and bug fixing. And tuning is tweaking in production. And again, we have all the changes doing in production with zero testing. And it's the same as before. But we have something that is better in this time of 2.0 websites. That is that we listen to user feedback. We have the Apple Store, the Google Play, with all the feedback from the users straight there. That you can see when you're uploading your application. You see all the feedback, negative and positive usually. So what is the future? The future is where we have continuous performance integration. We have all these smoke tests, unitary tests, and we can do something about them. when we talk usually about the performance, it's like a huge and expensive environment with this almost a replica of production, and it's really expensive to test something, but that is not true. That is what I'm going to try to put up here, that it's not true, that we can automate our trend reports, and we can have a real user monitoring and real-time feedback, and we can make use of it to benefit the performance. And of course, I'm talking in a Scrum or Agile environment, okay, where we have all these little teams delivering little packs of code, packages of code, and there's usually only one or two, maybe two, people with expertise in performance. So all the packages are going to this person. That girl is me there, in a crazy status of, it's going live, production. So we are trying to manage all things. That means there's only one person for I don't know, but maybe 5 teams, developer teams with their QAs. What happens that one person cannot absorb everything, even if I'm superwoman, but I cannot. So we have to get the performance before from the scratch of the code. Okay, so what happens? We have to test. But testing is not only for QA. It's for developers as well. I'm talking about unitary tests. I'm talking about smoke tests, about metrics. Okay, so we have to validate that application is able to handle X users per hour. Okay, that's one thing we have to validate. But we can, as developers, as system administrators, as whatever, as DevOps, we can compare, we can do a comparison of this build takes longer than this other build. Something is wrong there. If this build takes 5 seconds or it uses more resources as CPU or memory or whatever, it's wrong. Something is wrong. Okay, I have to investigate that, and I can do it as a developer, as a developer or system administrator. There's no need for a QA to test it. Okay. Of course, one of the focus of a performance tester is to validate the production performance, and usually to dimension all the machines and the services. Okay, that's why we are closer to operators and system administrators or DBA administrators than to QA and developers most of the time. So this is high availability. One of my tasks in Telefónica is to test the HA. Okay, redundancy and resilience. It's like, you're a performance tester, you should care about response time. Yeah, but my main focus is uptime. And if one machine is not redundant and it just drops, it goes down, there's no uptime. So I have to test that as well. So actually, in our milestones, we have a ready for acceptance and ready for service. Most of it, ready for acceptance milestone, is for the application itself, where ready for service is checking that all the system and the platform is perfectly deployed or whatever to give service. Okay. So it's the application and the system that must be stable, efficient, and dimensioned according to the usage. Okay. So I always say that performance is like a spinning class. Okay. So when you go to a spinning class, you have these peaks of performance of your lungs and your heartbeat, and you have to be between 65% and 85%. That is when you are doing some exercise. Well, servers are the same. If they are under 65% of usage, they are underused. So it's no point. You are overdimensioning your servers. So your capacity, the velocity you're giving is great, but you have a real budget expense there. You have a hole in your budget instead of your resources. So it's not only the response time that is important, it's as well the use of the resources that you need to grow in the future and that you need at the usage right now, in this point that you're going live. So efficiency as understood as a capacity to dispose of those resources. okay, to achieve an objective that is the happiness of your user. Okay, so it's response time and uptime. Of course, scalability. You may have a business that is like a startup, and you can have a big hype. Spotify is growing like 1,000 servers every 6 months or something like that. So you have to have an application that is able to scale with the usage and your growth. Maybe you die in the instant, but you have to try. You have to think of scalability. Of course, as performance, you have to think of the scenarios. As I said before, users are really important. So you can have, there are more, but at least there are two kinds of users. This is the one that is impatient, that is always refreshing your website or your application, and the one that's just idling in your application and is just clicking randomly. So you have to give service to both of them. So you have to imagine the ideal scenario for your application and where it's going to be deployed and which is the usage of your application. So once you have this, you have to create or recreate an ideal world isolated environment called pre-production. That is not necessary, and this is really important, it's not necessarily a copy of production environment. We cannot have an environment, a full production environment as a test environment because of the expenses. The budget is really important in this case. So what we need actually when we are fixing a production environment is that the scale, the ratio between all the elements in the complex system are more or less the same as we have in production. So you cannot have, for instance, a MongoDB that is exactly the same as your production MongoDB server, and your front ends are like 8 times less. Okay, and this is a real, real example, because you're not gonna do anything with that. So basically, because when you will test in your production environment, you will just get your MongoDB down. It will be easy. So we have to deal with a copy and down the scale environment. That is important, the ratio between all the elements in the system. Of course, we need to have monitoring services in pre-production as we have in production, because as we test as well HA, high availability, we need to have all the alarms and make them significant for the operators. Okay, so we have to test them. Actually, it's good that the operators, the Devops, are in the production environment testing those alarms, testing with us together all the monitoring systems before going live. Sometimes it's an overhead in our system, the monitoring services. So we have to test that. So what is the point? I have talked about developers and system administrators and operators. Okay, the performance teams is just not only the performance tester. It's a culture. Everyone has to be involved in performance. That is integration, since from the developer to the release manager to the DBA, the product owner has to be involved in performance. They have to be aware of the resources of the system in live, and they have to be aware of what we are going to prove and test before going live. So it's from the developers that can use decorators or annotations in Java and other tools in .NET while compiling, that you see the elapsed time in execution for every method or call, and from that metric to the deployment in production. Okay, we have tools. We have really many tools, and these kind of tools are available in the market. They are commercial. They are as well open source. And you always have to check them, whether they are fit your necessities or not. And if all the system, all the people involved in the platform can benefit of that tool. Of course, we have the real user monitoring. Not all our users are Ferraris in this case. Okay, sometimes they just have a little modem still somewhere in the world that they are reaching our system in a strange way that we don't care, but we should. Okay, so it's the psychology and the user environment what it's important to us. And of course, the best practices. We are at the end. This is a methodology. This is a QA standard. So we have a best practice that is QA Maxima. It's motto that keep it simple. Just cache it wisely and invest in testing and monitoring, creating a culture of performance in your organization, and get it in your product life cycle. That is really important. And of course, as I'm in research and developer, innovation is the key. We have investing in innovation, in research. We have new tools, we have new technologies, and we have always to keep up to date with these challenges that we have in the market. So what happens in internet in 1 minute, this is amazing sometimes, and this is the last year's. At the moment, I'm working in a project that it's Movistar TV. So YouTube, it's one of my, I don't know how to say, but it's my objective in life. Okay, so I'm watching at them. It's my way. And this is what happens in internet, and it's increasing every day. Okay, so this is what we have to expect as performance user. People, you are not expecting a page to load in 5 seconds. That's too much. That was like 6 years ago. Now they expect them to load in Facebook standards, so this is 2 seconds. So we have to get there. So this was what we should do in the ideal world, but what we have to do, what we need to do to get this performance culture in our companies, in where we work, in our environment. So we have first to understand the project and the context of the project. It's not the same to create a little application for a mobile than to create a huge application for like a TV. Okay? So you need to know the vision of your project. You need to know the context to how many people is going to use this application. You have to understand the system and the environment and the performance build schedule. Of course, we cannot deliver performance tweaks every week or every day. We have to wait for a functionality to arrive and tweak it after that. An improved way of working. Okay, so we improve performance while doing unit testing, because you have the performance tester next to you as developer, and you know how much this takes to load or to be called. Okay, we have to be next to the system administrators to configure and to assess the new hardware as well. To evaluate algorithm efficiency sometimes with architectures and monitor resource, because you are the performance test, and you have to know that in life you have only 5% of the CPU in your database free, so you cannot get a functionality that uses 10%. Something will be wrong at that point. So you have to monitor the resources strengths, and you have to measure response times, and you have to have a risk management that will help you to evaluate the growth speed of your system or your application. So you have to configure the test environment. That's really important, is what I said before. First is an isolated network environment. You have to work with isolated. No one can be there. No one can be using your resources. You have to procure a hardware that's similar as production, but you don't need to have all the servers. Okay, if you have a system with 8 servers, you can just deal with 2. You have to coordinate all the IPs for spoofing. That is really important, all these network things, because sometimes it's bad for your test environment to have no balancer, for example. You need to have all the monitoring tools and operating systems like production, all the versions, all the tools, all the resources the same. And of course, you have to have your load generation tools. That's the only thing that is different. Okay. you can have your tools or develop your own. That is not that hard, actually. Of course, you have to identify and coordinate tasks because it's a team of everyone in the platform, from developers to system administrators. So you have to coordinate those tasks. You have to work together in every case with a person adequate to the job, actually. And you have to specifically talk about what data will be collected. It's not just if you have, I don't know, for example, you have an application that uses cache, and you are requiring CPU metrics when you should be collecting memory usage. Okay, so you have to ask the proper person that which resources this part of this component of the application is using. So you have to know who will assist, how, and when, okay, because everyone has his tasks, and you have one common that is performance. And of course, you have to sequence the work items by priority. Of course, there are critical and significant paths in your application. Maybe there's a report that uses a huge amount of resources, but it's done once a year. So, okay, let that guy go for a coffee when he asks for that report. I don't mind, it's once a year. But the login is critical. It uses no resources, but it's critical, or else he wouldn't be able to do that report. So you have to work items. You have to work with the components that are critical and that are significant. Okay? And of course, you have to execute those tasks. And sometimes that is the problem, that you have a group of people that have their own tasks. The system administrator has his tasks. The release manager has his. So you have to execute all usually in 2 weeks span time. That is your time for testing in the pre-production environment. And you have to analyze together all those tests and run them, and sometimes taking them to production because you are not really confident of the results in pre-production. So you need a window, a span time on production to make that test, to run that test again. So you have to revisit constantly your performance and priorities, and you have always to be communicative with your production team. Of course, analyzing these huge amounts of data, that is one test maybe like 5 gigabytes of data sometimes, or even more, you have to pause your time sometimes and just sit down and start studying and making some statistics and some numbers to get this magic number, okay? So you have to pair with developers, architects, and administrators to analyze the results. Of course, as a performance tester, you are not an expert on database monitoring, or you're not an expert on networking, so you have to pair with that person with those results. But actually, this is ideal again. So what we do every day. So I get an example. I'm working for, as I said before, I'm working for Movistar TV. So we have several platforms. You can watch now your TV from your PC, from your iPhone, from your Android, from your iPad. So there are several platforms, and it's a really complex system. So what we do, we have an HTML5 platform where we use Wiselow and Firebook every day, and we compare every day. We do a benchmark of how long does it take for the home to load, actually, for the home and for the login. At the moment, we want to benchmark as well the visualization of content, but at the moment we don't have that. It's next. We use JMeter for all the APIs that we have, and the PC client, all the part of frontends, we use JMeter, and we compare branches. We are now in the version 2.2, and we are comparing it with 2.1. Okay, so we choose which functionality is going faster. Of course, streaming is a really important part of this. And, well, this is it. If you want to ask me something, we're most likely to to answer you. And, well, don't know. Any questions? In Spanish, in English, in German, Portuguese? Catalan, no? Aquí, there. There's some mic somewhere, or? Oh, there, okay. Hello, hello.
Hello. Oui, yes,
Yeah.
it works. You have been talking about performance unit testing a few times in your presentation. I was wondering how you do that. My experience is that it doesn't work for us, but I would be really happy to make it work for us as well.
Actually, in which kind of language? Because we have in Python, and we have a library in Python that only measures the lapse time that unit test has taken, okay? And in Java, we have a stronger, we have some annotations that makes the same, but it goes more deep. It goes to component and to class and method and calls. So what we do is actually a benchmark. We don't, what we do is compare each build. So if one of your unit tests takes way longer than the build before, it sets an alarm. It's that easy. It's not nothing else. It's not really hard. I mean, it's not really hard, and it doesn't impact that much. It won't tell you you're using more memory or you're using more CPU. It just says it takes 3 seconds more this time than the other, and you will say, why? Okay, and you will have to execute it again and check it if it works. And actually, it's not a real. It's not. It's effective, though it's not potente. It's not potent, I think, or potency. It doesn't allow you to do much things, but at least it gives you a trend of each build that you do. That you will have that trend, and you will see how it goes improving your performance, or it goes down. So, I don't know.
Hi. I consider that performance tests are really hard. So, what tools do you recommend for integrate on each release?
Tools.
Open source.
Open source. It depends. You have to evaluate. It's one of the points. You have to evaluate all the tools in the market. Okay. For example, I haven't get it in the slides, but when I test streaming, I cannot use JMeta for streaming, and I cannot use any open source. Sadly, I can use a real cheap tool that is called Stress Stimulus, but I'm gonna tell you here. But JMeter is really capable of doing things. Okay, it's not friendly user. It's not an easy tool, but you can manage, and you will get better even if you invest time in develop your own plugins. Okay, so if you have a developer friend, just tell them to make this plugin for me, please. Or if you have some Java skills, you can do it. Okay. There are some other tools that we use in Python environments, such as multi-mechanize. That is really, it's a pretty nice tool as well, but it's Python. But no, I love Python. Well, it's a really nice tool. There are really many tools in open source, but they do specifically one thing. The problem between commercial and open source tools is that is really specifically for that application or for that component, for MongoPerf or SonarPerf, or, there's always a tool perf after. The problem is that you cannot find, or at least I haven't found yet, a tool that get all these components together apart from those that are commercial, from SilverFormer or LoadRunner, that gets all these little tools. I would say just search the web and look for the open source tool that recommends for that component, for that technology, and make your own. That's possible as well.
And how far in time do you release the digital TV?
How far in time? How many times, or how?
Yes. How many release and how times from one release to another? If these peer performance tools. Sorry.
The truth of or the sweets. Okay, the
As
truth.
you want.
Okay, the truth. Like 2 months, every 2 months. Depends, because we have several task forces. For example, we are releasing now a little tweak in the systems to be enabled for the Barça Madrid on 27th. Okay, that is not a big release. When I meet major version is every 2 months. They want even less, but well, actually 2 months is 3 because of the delays always in the testing and blah blah blah. But you should be in 2 months. But we have some bug fixing and minor releases every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, tops. But major releases every 2-3 months.
I would like to ask you, it's clear that in an environment such a massive as Movistar TV, you should have dedicated pre-production and testing phases. But I would like to know if you could provide us a little more detail about how do performance engineers collaborate with developers in trying to move the analysis and the optimization of the code to the very beginning. I mean, while they are developing, to detect possible bottlenecks or anti-patterns, how do you collaborate from performance engineers and developers in that phase of development before building the whole?
Actually, for Movistar TV, I started in version 2.0. Okay, the first thing I did was to check every single API methods in the platform, and I gave reports to the developer saying this takes too much, or this method is called too many times in this page, or okay, I did those metrics. It was how often is called this method, and how long does it take to load, and how was it degrading or decreasing the responsiveness depending on the load. And I gave those methods to our developer team in Brazil, actually. And we just have these interactions. They were giving it back to me. I was testing them. I was giving them back to them, saying, okay, this is going better, but you have to improve this memory usage or this query in database that is doing this. I don't know, but it was like, well, it was a huge query. It was like 23 joins or something like that. It was huge. I tried to improve it, okay? So this is the interaction between, the problem is that they are in Brazil and I'm in Spain, so we have this to deal a bit strangely with it. It's easier, I'm in another project within Telefónica and where the developers are in the same house. It's easier with them because I'm next to them sit, and at this point is, hey Almu, I have a problem with this, can you check it please? Or tell me what tool, or can you make me a script to test this? Because I've seen in my unit testing that it takes longer now than the build before, and I don't know why. Can you check it for me or do something? And it's easier for them in that way. When people are in Brazil or in Spain, it's quite difficult. It's just question of reports every time. And actually, every night I just run a script in JMeter with all the APIs, and I told them, okay, in this build, this API is taking longer than necessary, or in this, usually it's more than it's taking longer, it's called more times than needed. Okay, so please try to fix it. That's one of the things that I have to take care of most of the times. How many times is a method called? That's it. Yeah, okay.
One question. How do you get to use JMeter? I've been using JMeter for, I think, more than 10 years, and every time I use it, I say, oh shit, I mean, it's so complicated. I mean, I'm a Java developer, or even being a Java developer, I say, oh shit, it's so complicated, you know?
Yeah.
It's there should be something easier than that. Actually, the last time we built our own Python-based JMeter-like stuff, and was actually much easier to build everything from start than to create a plugin from JMeter. Really,
Yeah.
I mean, spend less time. So my question is, I respect a lot JMeter, have been around for many years, but what's your experience with it? I mean, one of my concerns is that it's not that easy to create concurrent tests for concurrency. It's like, oh my God. How do you get there? Because there were some plugins you were used to use, or...
How did I get to JMeter?
Yeah.
Because it's cheap, actually, it's no expense. Actually, I'm trying now to get a proper tool. Okay, I'm trying to get budget for. Well, I've been in Telefónica for 9 months, and I'm trying to get a performance team running. Okay, I'm supposed to be the leader of the performance team, so I'm trying to get budget for tools, get budget for headcount. I think the tool will be first than the headcount. But I don't use only JMeter. I use JMeter basically for APIs. Okay, or actually for HTML, I don't use JMeter at all because it's hell. It's a nightmare, so it's impossible to do it. I use another tools, such as Stress Stimulus with Fiddler. It's really a nice tool, though and it's low cost. Okay, it's the first tool I was able to get. I use Load UI as well because our functional testers, and I love this way of recycling code. Our functional testers are using SOAP UI, so it's really easy to import those tests for our Load UI part. So it's really a question of effort to reuse that code. So I don't use only JMeter. I use really many other tools. If I'm, for example, testing a router, I can use a sort of Wireshark or Synato tool. So one of the first things I have to do when I arrive to a project is to check the tools, if they are available or not, if I need to develop a plugin or not, and what set of tools I need in that way. For streaming, for example, it took me a while to find a proper tool to test the streaming. Of course, I cannot use JMeter for streaming. Actually, I only use JMeter for APIs. That's the point. And it has problems with concurrent and things, so that's why it's a set of reports of JMeter, Load UI, Stress Stimulus, Fiddler, Apache Benchmark, and you all those your search. And usually what I do, the trick, is to have a baseline. The home is my baseline. It needs to take the same to load in every single test tool that I use. So that's my baseline. If Apache Benchmark is telling me that it takes 2 seconds and JMeter tells me it takes 10 seconds, something's wrong. So I tried just to support all the tools with a baseline, and that's the trick. And it takes time, but it's effective. It should be efficiency. It should be better with a commercial tool. I'm trying to get or Silperform or Load Runner. I'm not going to tell you any lie. I'm trying to get one of those commercial tools because they improve your way of life as tester. But at the moment, we have to deal with what we have, and it's an open source set tool. So that's the point.
Do you know push to test?
Push to test? No, actually not. I will just. I will write it down.
How do you handle the product owner? Because I saw that you are like the keeper for high availability, and maybe you are a bottleneck. How do you handle that with that upper pressure to release?
That's a good question. Actually, in Telefónica, I don't deal that much with product owners. It's a QA manager that deals with the product owners is like in front of me, okay? Like, you go. You say it's my fault, but you go before. Okay, I will talk about the experience in the former company I was, that it's InfoJobs. And there I have to deal with the product owners. And they all blame Almudena and performance for not going live sometimes. It's a question of culture. You have to tell them, okay, you can do this, but we don't have the resources. Or you can do this, but it won't benefit the real user at the end. It will take longer, and your abandon rates will be much higher. Okay, you have to talk in their way of talking about marketing and abandon rates and those. And of course, you have to convince them that when they are making up their user stories, they have to be aware of the resources of the system and the functionality, the real functionality. I remember when we tried some suggestion engine, we have this problem. We didn't have the technology to hold that new functionality. And I have to deal with the product owner saying, okay, you can do this in the future if you implement this before, because we cannot handle this. Okay, we don't have the technology to do this. We are not LinkedIn. We don't have this at this moment. You have to invest time and developers in making this product, and then you will be able to have this functionality you want. That's a problem sometimes.
Okay. Thank you, Almudena.
Yeah, no. Gracias.